It is forecasted that the internal combustion vehicles will decrease from 91% to 22% of U.S. vehicle sales, and electric vehicle sales will increase from 2% to 31%. Now think about those numbers. That is a remarkable shift. And we've heard others say, and you might hear some of our panelists say, that this might even be an underestimation. So just how important is the auto industry to our region? Yesterday I had the opportunity to attend Mich Auto's annual meeting with some other SEMCOG staff in Detroit, and the presentation was moving and a little bit scary at times, and we'll hear a little bit about that more in detail in a moment. But this table that you're looking at right here shows regions and industry clusters that they are specialized in. The so-called location quotient, or LQ, measures the concentration and importance of an industry to a region's economy. At the national level, all LQs are 1. Our LQ for automotive is 6.7. It means that the share of automotive jobs in our region is more than 6 times higher than the U.S. average, meaning that our economy is highly specialized in automotive, and it shows us the importance the automotive industry has to our region's economy, or is to our region's economy. Other regions have strengths in other industries, as you can see, and those are also areas that we can improve upon. So in terms of the impact of the auto industry to our state, data shows that it supports nearly 1 million jobs, generates $4 billion in taxes, and directly contributes $134 billion to Michigan's economy. In terms of jobs, the automotive industry is still the backbone of Michigan's economy, creating 1/5 of Michigan's jobs. According to federal data in 2019, there were 300,000 direct jobs, 650,000 indirect jobs, for a total of 950,000 jobs. Now, you know our population in the state is just over 10 million, so think about that. 10% of every person living in Michigan, including babies and retirement age, 10% of our population are in the auto industry. We understand that the industry shifts as the industry shifts from the traditional internal combustion engine to electric vehicles, the jobs will change, and so must we. We must be prepared, and that's the message we heard yesterday at the Mich Auto annual meeting, and you're going to hear that today from our panelists. If we don't do our best to attract and retain talent, we are in big trouble. And you all, every person in this room, you might not know it, but you will play an important role in this. These jobs that we're talking about include jobs like assembly line workers, engineers, product design, administration, finance, as well as the auto part suppliers, dealers, wholesalers, plus community jobs in hospitals, restaurants, schools, other direct employees as those employees spend their earnings in our state. SEMCOG's partner organization, Metropolitan Affairs Committee, or Coalition, or MAC, recently convened a mobility work group made up of leaders from business, labor, government, and utilities to understand the challenges facing our state and our ability to compete for the battery plants, investments, and jobs. And I have the privilege of serving with this extremely talented group of business leaders across our state. We heard from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and site selectors, as well as some of our panelists today, on current efforts, challenges, business considerations, and others when they are deciding to invest in any state. On the screen are some priority challenges noted during these discussions. And I can tell you these discussions have been very passionate, as you'll hear from our panel today. We're going to hear from our panel also on some other things. Some of the assets we have. We have 400 according to the Detroit Regional Partnership. They include highly ranked research universities, skilled workforce, competitive tax rates, and our strong automotive ecosystem. These are the types of factors that resulted in the recent investment decisions by Ford and General Motors here in our state of Michigan. So now on to our panelists, and they are distinguished. They're going to share their expertise and their passion on this subject. First, I'm going to introduce to you Ms. Maureen Donahue Krause. Maureen is the president and CEO of the Detroit Regional Partnership. It's the leading economic development nonprofit that serves the 11 counties that make up the Detroit region. She also I had the privilege of working with Maureen at Oakland County Economic Development, and we're grateful to have you here today, Ms. Krause. Next, not many people can say this, the Honorable John Ricolte Jr., former ambassador, United States ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. He's the chairman of Wallbridge. He might know a little something about that GM project. His company is building that 4 million square foot addition in our plant. But he also serves as MAC's Mobility Committee chairperson, and he brings a wealth of knowledge and innovative ideas to the topic. And then finally, help me welcome Glenn Stevens Jr. Glenn is the executive director of Mish Auto. Mish Auto promotes, retains, and grows the automotive industry. They're the state's only automotive and mobility cluster organization. And Glenn has served in the automotive industry for 30 years and Mish Auto for 9. And a little fun fact about Glenn, you can't find him on this hand. You have to find him on this one. How do I do it? He's a Youper. But ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our distinguished panel. This will be interactive. We want your attention and your questions. But first, I'm going to start with our panel. So first, a question for all 3 of you panelists. And while you answer this question, if you want to just briefly tell us a little bit more about you, if I missed anything important to this topic, you can do that as you answer the first question. But on a scale of 1 to 10, so you can introduce yourself and then tell us on a scale of 1 to 10, how are we, the state of Michigan, doing in the fight to secure the future of our mobility industry? Mr. Ricolte, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here with you all today, and what you probably don't know about me is my company is the world's leading company in building automotive infrastructure across all of North America. We're currently building 8 electric vehicle plants in Mexico, United States, and here in the greater Detroit area. And part of the services that we provide to our clients is that we run site selection efforts for them. So we're right in on the ground floor and see exactly why other states are doing so well and we're doing so poorly. I wanted to just take a minute and also point out a couple of facts that are supported by what you saw on the screen here. When I got back from my ambassadorship in the early part of 2021, I sat down with my team and asked them how was the business going, and they said, we've never seen anything quite like this. They had identified 70 projects across America that were related to the automotive industry. This would include EV plants, battery plants, anode plants, new steel mills, new aluminum plants, chip plants, data centers, you name it. There were 70 of these, and they totaled a staggering capital investment of $200 billion. Of those, today, 25 battery plants have already been either built or sited. There are only 2 in Michigan, and one of them hasn't even been built yet. That's the one General Motors will do in Lansing. We have 14 ICE plants, transmission and engine plants, and half of those plants will no longer be needed in less than 10 years. And when you think about the number of job losses that we're going to have, we are going to have a tidal wave come over us. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this conversation. But what's more important, out of those 70 projects that were identified, Michigan was only considered for 9 out of 70. And out of those 9, we have so far won 3. It is a very poor hit rate, and if it continues, our state will be a shell of its former self. I think I'll stop there and let...
So 1 to 10.
1 to 10, I give us a 2 or a 3, if 10 is the best number.
It is. Thanks for all the good news. I'm kidding. No, this is what we need to hear. And I think there will be a call to action. So thank you, Mr. Ricolte. We'll just go right down the line now. Mr. Stevens.
I can assure you I'm not going lower than 2. I will say 5, and I'll tell you why. I think that John is spot on, and fortunately, these 2 next to me are not strangers. I talk to them both quite frequently, because that's the nice thing that I do see in Michigan right now, and in every corner of it is there is a lot of collaboration. There is a lot of communication. So people are on the same page about what it's going to take to be competitive. But John's right, we're not competitive when you stack up everything you need to stack up against it. I would say 5 because we are doing a lot of things right. We are still, it's not marketing, it's not hype, we are the epicenter of North America's auto industry. We are one of the global epicenters, and that's because you will not find anything like what we have in our cluster. There's 26 OEMs with headquarters or R&D or technical centers. There's nothing like that in the world. But I would also say that it's not your birthright, and I think that we've taken that as our birthright for many, many years. And when you are trying to work your way through the inflection point by being the same, or let's keep things status quo, you become a victim of that inflection point, and we felt it much harder. The good news is we've got a lot of good things going on. The reason I say 5 is that if we don't build upon the things that we have, and I think the list that you put up there was spot on with regards to the key characteristics about why companies grow, and let's be clear, the ones that are here are the most important ones we have, or why they want to attract or locate here. Those are very much the factors. So I'll go with 5.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kraus.
So hello, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here in honor of Speaking of Mobility. My sciatic nerve went out a few days ago, and so I thought, what a great time to talk about mobility. Anyway, happy to walk in here to see you today. So I actually agree with Glenn at about a 5. When you're in economic development, your job is to be a little more of the glass half full. However, it's to identify the obstacles and work on them. And I would say a lot of that work is going on. So I spent earlier today talking to a big prospect who's looking at our area, and then having an hour-and-a-half long session with site consultants from around the country who were talking to us about site readiness and what we need to do in Michigan and how competitive or non-competitive we are. So like my 2 colleagues to the right of me who are really just experts in what they do, I would say that we have certainly some strengths. Our talent is a strength. It's experienced. It knows auto. It just needs to have the right skill set for the jobs of the future, for this ICE to EV. That's the lingo that we use. But it really is overall how everything will move in the future. So our talent is strong. As I think Supervisor Barnett alluded to, we did an assessment a few months ago for a grant proposal. Our region has over 400 assets already that support the mobility industry. There is no other region in this country, and there is no other region in the world that can say that. So we have that support infrastructure. But there are things we need to work on, and I know we'll get into them, but I will say site readiness is one of them. When people say, how are decisions made? Location, location, location. I'd tweak that a little right now. It's sites, sites, sites for these bigger projects, and in fact, for the smaller projects. I mentioned talent. We need to make sure they have the right skill set that's needed going forward, and that they convert the skills they have and the experience they have into that. Our incentive game is very weak. We spent the past 10 plus years getting rid of incentives. The problem is our competitors have them. So it's like being the only car dealership back in the day on Maple Road that didn't give rebates, right? So we have to be smart and strategic about them, but we really have to look at that. And the fourth thing I would say is something that doesn't have a lot of neat little data points to it, but it's something we hear from companies all the time. We have got to do a better job in this region of having collaborative conversations among our elected officials who are setting the tone for what the world thinks of us. It's not real great right now. They start conversations with our political discourse. I'll say, it used to be they would say to us, oh, Detroit, the crime, the poverty or whatever. Guess what? Conversations around the world don't start that way anymore, and I'm thrilled that they don't. But the world does see, strangely enough, political dissension, lack of agreement, lack of progress. And that is an issue that, once again, I don't have data points. All I have is the conversations that my team and I have every day. So those are 4 basic areas, but if we can build on the strengths, the talent, the ecosystem that we have, the supply chain that we have in all of your communities, we still have a chance.
Wonderful, thank you. You guys did a great job of answering some more of my questions, but I want to circle back to Glenn. And thank you for those great answers and kind of diving into what your organization's focused on. But Glenn, I'd like to know a little bit more about what is Mich Auto doing to help with this transition toward our new future?
Sure. So when we set out to establish Mich Auto, which was in 2007, it was completely grassroots, volunteer organization because, believe it or not, at that time, Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi all had statewide automotive associations, and we didn't. And so we came back, I was in Alabama, and we came back and said, listen, we're just taking our industry for granted. And if we're not focused on the talent pipeline, we're not focused on the CEO of the MEDC understanding, and the governor is not in tune with this industry, we will wake up and it will not be a good situation. So we've been at that really since then. And we serve as a statewide collective voice. We're different in that we tie everyone together. So in our investor base, membership base, we're fully supported. We have OEMs, suppliers, universities, community colleges, economic development, professional service firms. Anybody who touches the industry, it's a big tent, and we got to all be in this together. So that's what we focus on. That's what we do as an industry, and we work with companies like this and organizations like this day in and day out, relentlessly trying to move this industry forward.
Wonderful. And John, I'd like to know from you, and you're a leader in this industry and multi-faceted approach here, but what do you think, what's one thing you think we're doing right? I know, and I appreciate your candor, and we've talked a lot about this in our work group, but where do you think we're doing something right, and how can we build on that?
Let me just start by saying that this is really a great state, and it has a lot to offer. It's a hard-working state, but it's not appreciated on a global scale. In fact, the opposite is what people think about Michigan, that we have no work ethic left. But we've been able to leverage so far the industry and have convinced Ford and General Motors that at least in their existing plants to invest in EV. We all came together last fall, Democrats and Republicans, and they passed this SOAR bill, S-O-A-R, which in fact provided $1.5 billion that would allow us to retain General Motors, in fact, not more than retain them. Two of their plants, Hamtramck and Lake Orion, are going to be here for a long time. But there are, I think there's 11 other assembly plants that are making internal combustion vehicles. How do we retain those? It's going to be a big, big challenge, but we already have set a precedent on doing that. I would like to let you indulge me in talking about the white-collar workforce, because I keep on hearing everywhere, well, we've got the white-collar workforce, there's 400 sites, we've got all of this talent. But we're in the beginning of a new revolution in terms of losing that also as we sit here today. If you were to go inside the big tech centers, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, you would be shocked as to how many people are no longer there. I'm not going to specifically give you names, but less than 10% of a workforce that may have totaled 50,000, when you add them all together, are actually still working at those sites. So where are they? They're back at home. And in fact, General Motors announced publicly a year ago that you don't have to come to work anymore. Chrysler does not allow 50% of the workforce to come back to their tech center. So this is already happening, and people are moving out of the state of Michigan because they can do their job from anywhere. So this thought that this tech center and all of this high intelligence part of the industry is going to stay here, it's already being challenged, and companies like Tesla are already moving their product development closer to their factories, moving out of Northern California in the Oakland Bay area and going to Austin, Texas. So I say our hair is on fire right now. So what do we need to do in order to overcome this and to use all of these assets that we have? And the very first thing is political alignment. We do not have it in our state. In 2008, Governor Granholm put an enormous package on the table to attract Volkswagen to come here. And they didn't come. In fact, it was the largest incentive of anybody. And everybody on this table will tell you, incentives are the last stop, not the first. You can't score a home run until you go to first base, second base, and third base. Incentives are third base. It seals the deal. And we can't even get to first base. So we got problems with white collar, We've got problems with political alignment, and that's why I came here today to plead with you, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we cannot allow all the things that we don't agree on to interfere with economic development, which should be a bipartisan effort all the time, 100% of the time.
Thank you. Well said. I'd like to shift gears a little bit, and I think we have a room. Raise your hand if you're an elected official. There you go, majority of our room. I want to talk a little bit about what can we do? What can we do? You know, what is our homework? And I know, and I also want to get a little more into the data too, Glenn, and some of the things that I heard yesterday at your annual meeting. But I want to just kind of pose this to each of you, and maybe we'll start with Maureen, and we'll work back this way. But local governments, you know, many of us are either obviously city, village, township, county, elected officials. Do we really have a role to play here? I know talent is something I heard probably 150 times yesterday afternoon in Detroit at this meeting. I can tell you just briefly from our experience, you know, we would have never gotten this investment in our plant, which literally doubles the value of our entire community. A $4 billion investment doubles the value of our community of about 42,000 residents. If we didn't have the partnerships across the aisle, as was stated, this is not a time for partisan politics. But one of the things that I think we can do, and I'll just give you my input first and then I'll throw it to you guys, is we can make sure when we do have these opportunities, we hit home runs or we score touchdowns. And we're writing checks that I hope we can cash. But when General Motors made the announcement on January 25th in Lansing, I was there. I got to sit next to GM CEO Mary Barra, and I shook her hand and said, we can't thank you enough for choosing our plant, our community for this investment, and we won't let you down. I said, my goal is at the end of this project, you will say and your team will say this was the smoothest local government unit of government that we ever worked with in any country. And then I came back and told all my directors that. And they said, how are we going to do this? I mean, there's literally, we're not capable of doing this on our own. And then we sent her a giant card, and I don't think we have the picture, but I had a picture of our whole staff, and it said, we won't let you down, and we all signed it. And now it's in writing. We can't let them down. So now when John's team, and we're doing little things, like we're actually moving a mobile township hall to the site because they're going to have 4,400 tradesmen and women out there working just to save them the time from driving back and forth for inspections and things and submittals. We're going to be on site. So those are just some of the small things. But what would you say, what are some tangible things people can take back to their city council or their areas of influence and do? Maureen.
Yes, I've spoken to probably quite a few of your communities about this already, but it's really true. You are the end closers of these deals. And, you know, when we think about our customer, we all have different customers. Your customers are your residents and the business community that is there or coming there. And, you know, when I think about what does the business customer want the most, they want certainty. They want consistency. They're making 20, 30, 40-year investments in your community. And it's true whether you're a township or the state. They don't like rules changing every couple of years. They don't like programs changing every couple of years. And, you know, John alluded to this. We need a statewide commitment on something that we all agree on. We all agree that we want better employment opportunities for our residents and we want more investment in our communities. So when I look at an individual community, and believe me, there are some that we just love doing deals in, and there's others that we roll our eyes and say, oh, this is going to be a headache. Don't be the headache, right? Put out consistent policies. Make sure that when you're talking to a business about what you can do, that you can deliver. And that goes to every level of government. And I would even encourage the state the same way. You know, originally, the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, was set up to be a consistent, nonpartisan, long-term statewide economic development program. It was that at the beginning. I would say it's not quite that anymore. There's not an overall state strategy on how we're going to attack this problem that's happening so fast. It's just kind of crazy when you talk about the level of activity and the volume. every elected official, because you have a voice and you can make a difference, should be looking at how can we have a community that delivers what we promise, that doesn't change our mind halfway through, and that wants to do the best for our customer. And like I said, some communities do it a lot better than others, but it's something that we all should strive for, saying what our plans, what our policies are, what our site plan review process is, whatever it is, and then sticking to it. That is certainly one thing. And then I would encourage you, because I know you're all local officials, talk to your state legislators. Tell them why this is important. Tell them why this is important, not just for the community that they represent, for that the state overall. When you saw the numbers on how much money auto brings into this community, there may not be any auto employment in Newaygo County, and I just picked that one off the top of my head. But I bet they get some of that tax revenue that comes in. So it really does impact every community in this state.
Thank you.
So let me just come back to Orion real quick. Make no mistake about it. If the business community, the legislature, the leaders had not come together to fund the incentives, which we did not have, that plant would not be alive in a few years. It wouldn't. The writing was on the wall. So John's right, there's 12 assembly plants. Only one is fully electrified now, that's the Factory Zero in Hamtramck. One of the Ford truck plants is basically a third, and now we'll have Orion. That's 9 others. If the battery supply chain system is not built around it, or it's not accessible, we have to remember too that we are a peninsula. You know, we have to keep in mind that we're not sitting in the middle of the country logistically, but we have 12 assembly plants. And it's really critical. So what I would say, to answer your question, it's very clear, and I'll go back to the first slide. There were 3 things in the middle: incentives, site selection, and I think it was non-labor.
Can we go back to that slide, please?
Non-labor inputs.
And we leave
I'm
it
not
up?
sure, I can't remember what the 4th one was. No, that was the first one. Workforce was the first one, and communities was the last one. The middle 3, they kitch in the game, okay? And John's right, our hair should be on fire because we're not on the game on those middle 3. So the answer, I think, to the question, and to all of you, and you have an open offer, is your responsibility, is to make sure that you have that last one taken care of. Because community strength and the workforce that wants to live there and work there and play there is going to be the differentiator. Because 3 days after that Orion announcement, there was another announcement. And that was the announcement that General Motors is going to hire 8,000 high-tech workers. We talked about it last night. And they can live wherever they want to live. So if Michigan doesn't have communities and base-level infrastructure supports, and that infrastructure comes in many shapes and sizes, we won't be in the game for those 8,000. And it doesn't matter whether they work in the Warren Tech Center or in Marquette as a tech worker for General Motors. They need to be here living and paying taxes and raising families. So that's what I think that each one of you in your communities can absolutely be a fundamental difference maker in.
Great answer. Thank you. John, what can we do?
Well, first of all, I would say we have to demand action, and we haven't done that for a long, long time. I can't tell you how many studies. We don't need any more studies. We know what we have to do. You have to demand action from Lansing. Demand action from your state rep, from your senator. You need to call them in. It has to be discussed during this election coming up to November. If you don't make this the number one crisis that we're going through, we'll dilly-dally. 1/3 of all of the battery plants that are going to be needed have already been sited. If we continue down this path, we won't have enough. And those assembly plants will go somewhere else because they've got to be co-located. So demanding action is number 1. Past that, I agree with Maureen and say that we don't have a vision for Michigan's economic strategy. Nobody can point to me and say, what is our articulated vision that the population of the state of Michigan understands? What is it? 50 words, tell me. Nobody can tell you. We don't have a strategy that we all work toward. So I have proposed to the governor and to the House Speaker and to the Senate Majority Leader a number of things that I think that we need to do going forward. Number 1, they have to demonstrate that economic development is not partisan, it's bipartisan. We must demonstrate this to the world, to the public, and to the most important person, which is the corporate investor. We don't have a good reputation. We fight about everything in this state. That's number one. Number two, I've recommended the governor that she set up two task force made up of strong leadership that will make this happen, that their goal is to put into force action, one on economic development and one on K through 12 education. Those are essential. If we don't get those in place, we're going to continue to wallow. That's number two. And number three, we have to continue to develop those 5 things that you see right there. And the most important one right now is site availability. If you don't have a site, it doesn't make any difference what else you have. There's not a site that you can go to today that's almost ready to start building on. Other states have many, many of them. We have one mega site. It's in Marshall, Michigan. I think it's like 1,500 acres, around that. We don't have anything more than that in terms of...
It's not perfect either.
It's not perfect. And that's what that SOAR fund was for, to start to help the state to collect land and to have 3, 4, 5 sites spread out all over the state. If we don't get that site development going soon, other states are buying the land, they're putting the infrastructure in. How much did Tennessee spend? By the way, this is just a factoid. Does anybody here know how many acres Blue Oval City is in Tennessee? Anybody know the number of acres that site is?
I think it's 3,000.
4,000 acres. It'll eventually have 24 million square feet of manufacturing space. Does anybody know here how big the Rouge is? 1,000 acres. It's 4 times the size of the Rouge. Just to give you an idea of the scale of what's happening. And I think our hair is on fire, and you can probably tell by the intensity of my speaking style. We need to do something in the next 6 months. If we wait a year, or if we wait till the next legislature and the next governor, whoever it might be, come into office, we are going to lose round 2, which will be the next 25 battery plants that come on board.
And if I could just add to that, speaking of that Tennessee, that was a little kick in the pants, maybe not hard enough. We seem to need that to get inspired to do stuff here. The state of Tennessee spent 19 years putting that site together. So this is not something we're going to solve overnight. And sometimes we're more reactive than proactive. That's a trait, I think, that we have. Proactively, we would be looking at sites that'll be available and ready in 5 years, and 10 years, and 15 years. We have a crisis today, certainly, and it's not even the mega sites. We can't buy 20 acres in the city of Detroit if we wanted to, right? I mean, there aren't good sites, and it's not even Southeast Michigan, it's the whole state. Sites that have the infrastructure, the power, and the talent radius so that you're going to have talent. We have a lot of sites, but they don't have infrastructure or they don't have workforce anywhere nearby. So, we have to really look at the whole site issue. I agree with John. It's the biggest issue we have right now of many issues is the site development issue. Once again, back to what you can do in your community. Do you have a site? Do you have a site that maybe needs a couple of things? So this is my pitch. Amy said we could be a little provocative here, right? So our communities now, all of you have more money than you're probably going to see in your time in office through ARPA funds. Is there a portion of that money you can use for site development? If you only have 10 acres, but there's 10 acres in the adjoining community that you could marry together, think about strategically how you can have a site that is ready to go. And the way the site consultants today told us how they view what is industrial site readiness, they go back. What day does the company have to be shipping product out the door? And then they go backward for constructing a facility or renovating a building. That's what site readiness is. It's not 3 to 5 years anymore.
Right.
So think about what you can do today.
Thank you. Glenn, I'm going to give you one more word, and then we're going to come to you and
Yeah.
see if there's any questions out there.
I was in Nashville 3 days after the Blue Oval City announcement, and I was ironically there to speak at a conference on electrification. And I sat in the front row and I listened to Governor Lee, former Governor Haslam, and the president of the UT University system. And they were reveling in their win, but that's not what made the impact on me that day. Oracle is building an 8,500 person tech campus in downtown Nashville on the river with an average salary of $110,000 a year. Okay, that's where the economy takes you on the upward trajectory. Having our manufacturing base, and we do that right, keeps us in the game, keeps us where we're at, keeps us a 5. I really believe, and Michigan's real household median income is right in the middle of the pack. We're above some of the states, which we used to poke fun at. Tennessee, you watch where Tennessee goes over the next few years, but we're far below Colorado, Minnesota, and Massachusetts. The only way to change that position is if we grow knowledge-based digital economy jobs. And that's everything from the factory floor to those remote workers, to those tech workers, and it doesn't matter, it's industry agnostic. That is the only way Michigan's gonna grow for the long run, is to take advantage of what's gonna happen with this digital transformation. And that goes back to your communities and your schools. Because if your people aren't getting ready for the digital economy, they're not gonna be, we already have the 41st worst labor force participation rate in the country. It's just stunning to think about that number. That's not sustainable. That's not a 5.
And so the good news is we have a lot of influences in the room. And if you didn't know, that map on our screen, our logo, we, SEMCOG region, represent about half of the state's population. And the interesting thing in our evolution of our investment in our community, I've been to Lansing about at least a dozen times, in DC a couple, and it's remarkable, the people that serve there aren't experts at this. You are influencers. We need to tell this story. You need to tell your state rep and your state senators. You don't have to be an expert on economic development to get elected to the state house. I don't know if you know that. Matter of fact, you'd be shocked, some of the people I've met with, and I won't name names, that you're surprised they're there. They need us. We're the influencers. We need to carry this important message. And we can affect change. You might think my little village can't really do anything. Take your state rep to lunch. Give them this data. Arm them with information. It's not a partisan issue. It's a survival issue. And I believe we're going to win. Let's see. We got time for 1 or 2 questions, and I don't know where the mic went. There it is. Raise your hand if you have a question. Over here, Mr. Rockabood. Let's try to keep these to quick questions so we can get a response. Okay. We're trying to stay on time. We got just a couple minutes here before we thank this panel. Anybody with a question? When I think of like Readiness, anybody remember that M&M Super Bowl commercial? It's like, how do you not, but with the Detroit Choir, like, we're Motor City, baby, let's go. Yes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Mueller from Washtenaw Community College. And my question is this, Glenn, I met with the aerospace industry today with the Michigan Association. And the skill sets are very, the skill sets are, there's synergy between the automotive industry and aerospace. And with the electric things that are going on in the state, right now I looked at a map of the state of Michigan for just generally how many electric companies or those working with aerospace are within even this region. And I want to say around the Detroit area, et cetera, there's 428 companies. This is a huge opportunity. Ann Arbor Spark just had somebody come in and talk about that ran a component of NASA and the opportunity that there is for Michigan to step into this space to supply whatever it may be, manufacturing, small business development, that know-how. So I guess my question would be this: what have we done to not only just look at the automotive industry, but create the synergy with also building the aerospace industry and the opportunity here, and then the skill sets in K through 12 that get us to that place?
Yeah, that's actually something we're working on pretty diligently right now. There is an incredible defense and aerospace industry here. And there is a lot of synergy, but there could be more. And I've done a lot of mapping of the landscape to see where those can be. But the thing that I want to point out is there's a lot of synergy between a lot of industries. I mean, mobility's in the ag industry too. It really is. And the key is, I mean, how many times over the course of your life or career have you heard the expression, we have to diversify away from the auto industry? I mean, I can't tell you how many times. And I would argue the greatest platform we have for diversification is what's going on in the auto industry. Machine learning, artificial intelligence. The vehicle has 300 million lines of code in it now. And that transfers to all different types of industries. So those core competencies in the digital economy, if you build them here and you get known for having the talent where that innovates, then you can expand that into other industries and you can build more synergy. Because these companies will deploy R&D where the talent resides and where communities are strong. It's a fact.
Any final comments before we close this panel from our panelists? I just want to give them a very warm round of applause. Thank you, John and Glenn and Maureen. And while the message might have seemed dark at times, it's what we need to hear. And I think that's the most important message that you can take back to your communities and to the people that you can influence. We're staking our future on this. We need to. Let's thank them again. Thank you so much.